The Australian woodland seems still at first glance. Open country dotted with scrub and termite mounds, air shimmering with midday heat. Yet within this heatscape, life operates under a strict set of rules, dictated not by territory alone, but by the ability to withstand temperature. Here, survival is measured not only in speed or strength, but in how well an animal can master the art of heat management. And few embody this delicate balance better than the frilled-neck lizard. Perched upright on a slender tree trunk, it appears like a sentry posted against the horizon, its ridged body pressed tight to the bark, using height not just to scan for prey, but to catch even the faintest breeze. This lizard's story is not one of constant motion, but of careful calculation. An animal engineered to be still for long stretches, then burst into sudden high-speed sprints when opportunity or danger strikes. The frilled-neck lizard is famous for its dramatic display, the great circular frill that unfurls around its head like a sudden crown of flame, lined with bright orange and yellow membranes that startle birds and mammals into hesitation. Yet this fan is not merely a theater of intimidation. On closer inspection, the frill reveals its deeper purpose. It is lined with vascular skin, so thin that sunlight glows faintly through it when raised, and laced with blood vessels that act as radiant panels. When the lizard runs, its body temperature climbs rapidly, and with limited ability to sweat or pant, it must find other ways to dump heat. By gaping its mouth and flaring its frill, it creates a surface area wide enough for convective cooling, releasing excess warmth into the air. In the silence of the woodland, the display becomes more than a threat. It becomes a radiator cloak, a survival tool hidden within a spectacle. This duality between theater and physiology defines the lizard's daily life. Its strategy as a predator is deceptively simple: sit and wait. In the pale dust at the base of a termite mound or clinging to a vertical perch, the lizard watches for small insects, beetles, or even other lizards that pass too close. Unlike active foragers, it conserves energy by remaining motionless, blending into its background. But such patience comes with its own cost. The longer it sits under the sun, the more heat it accumulates. Thus, thermoregulation is woven into its hunting tactics. When the ground bakes, the frilled-neck lizard shifts to shadow hopping, darting from one pool of shade to another, breaking the long trek across exposed ground into brief sprints buffered by cool pauses. Each move is timed with the sun's angle, an instinctive calculation refined by evolution. In many ways, the lizard's frill serves as a window into a broader truth of reptilian life in Australia's open country. Surface area equals control. To expand is to vent heat, to collapse is to conserve it. On cool mornings, the frill remains folded neatly against the body, its thermal panels tucked away, while the lizard presses its back against sunlit bark to draw warmth in. By noon, when temperatures climb above tolerance, the same lizard becomes a master of heat release, finding breezy elevations or lifting its body from the hot ground to allow air circulation beneath its belly. This constant push and pull between heating and cooling is not peripheral. It is the central battlefield on which survival is decided. From a distance, the frilled-neck lizard seems almost comical when it erupts into its famous display, sprinting on hind legs with its frill flared like a sail, mouth wide as if roaring. To a predator, however, a goanna, a raptor, or even a dingo, this sudden burst is a calculated gamble. The display makes the lizard appear larger, more dangerous, perhaps too much trouble to pursue. But to the lizard itself, this moment doubles as an emergency heat purge. Sprinting forces muscles into anaerobic overdrive, producing both heat and lactic acid. The frill, deployed in panic, functions like a safety valve, dumping thermal overload in the very act of bluff. What seems like fearsome defiance is also biologically an act of self-preservation. The connection between physiology and landscape becomes clearer when one considers the habitat itself. The open woodland of northern and eastern Australia is shaped by termite mounds, scattered scrub, and patches of tall grasses. Each mound creates its own microclimate, its shaded base cooler than the sunlit soil nearby. The frilled-neck lizard exploits these differences with remarkable precision, choosing resting spots not just for visibility, but for temperature gradients. Insects cluster near mounds for their warmth-retaining walls, drawing the lizard's prey into predictable circuits. The predator's patience, then, is not laziness, but design. By anchoring itself near a mound, the lizard taps into the insect economy and regulates its heat with the mound's shade. The ecosystem itself becomes an extension of its physiology. Thermoregulation is often dismissed as background biology, a quiet function happening beneath the more visible drama of hunting and display. But here, it shapes everything. The lizard's diurnal rhythms, its choice of when to hunt, where to perch, how long to remain exposed, are all dictated by a contest with the sun. Reptiles are often described as cold-blooded, but the term is misleading. They are not passive recipients of heat. They are expert negotiators of it. The frilled-neck lizard shows this negotiation in every motion, warming up quickly at dawn, moderating with shade and breeze at noon, and slowing into stillness as evening temperatures drop. Each gesture is evidence of a finely tuned relationship between anatomy and environment. Even its perch choice reveals evolutionary ingenuity. Unlike ground-dwelling skinks that must endure the searing soil, frilled-neck lizards climb vertical trunks or posts to elevate themselves above the heat sink. The higher vantage point is not just strategic for spotting prey, it places the animal into cooler airflow, where convection assists in pulling heat from its body. Observed closely, one sees the subtle adjustments, a shift from sun-facing to shade-facing side of the trunk, the widening of the mouth, the partial lifting of the frill when the breeze strengthens. These are not random quirks, but deliberate adaptive tools of thermal governance. In this context, the frilled-neck lizard becomes more than a performer of bluff or a curious oddity of Australian fauna. It is an engineer of its own climate, using skin, posture, and habitat features to regulate what its physiology alone cannot. The drama of the frill, so often presented as a spectacle for the camera, carries within it a lesson in how life solves the problem of heat without sweat, fur, or high metabolic costs. It demonstrates that in ecosystems defined by extremes, survival is not simply a matter of running faster or hiding better. Sometimes it is about turning your very body into a machine for managing the invisible currents of air and temperature. From the perspective of the woodland itself, the frilled-neck lizard is both predator and participant. By consuming insects and smaller reptiles, it helps regulate populations that might otherwise boom unchecked. In turn, its reliance on trees and mounds ties its fate to the health of woodland vegetation and the presence of termites, those unassuming builders of soil architecture. Its physiology may seem self-contained, but it is enmeshed in a network of ecological relationships. The radiator cloak, then, is not only a symbol of personal survival, but of interconnected survival. Each frill that opens in the heat is an echo of a larger system, of soils, insects, breezes, and predators, all bound by the same laws of energy and exchange. To watch a frilled-neck lizard in its natural setting is to see the Australian heat made visible. It is to see temperature itself become something tangible, painted in the rise of a frill, the shimmer of blood vessels beneath thin skin, the deliberate pause in shade before the next sprint. The lizard does not conquer its environment. It adapts, negotiates, and survives within it. And in doing so, it reveals a fundamental truth about this land. In a world where heat dictates life, those who master its flow write the rules of survival. The midday Australian woodland is a place of contradictions. The air shimmers with heat, cicadas drone from the canopy, and even the shadows feel heavy. Yet scattered across these parched landscapes, river-red gum corridors, coastal eucalypt groves and inland woodlands, there are creatures that have learned to make the uninhabitable survivable. Among them, none is more deceptively adapted than the koala. To most eyes, it is an animal of leisure, spending the vast majority of its life perched in branches, eyes half closed, body slumped against the trunk, in a posture that looks closer to sleep than survival. But this apparent idleness masks an astonishing mastery of microclimates and energy balance. Every gesture, every choice of tree and branch is a response to the relentless physics of heat and water. The koala's world is bound to eucalyptus trees, and its relationship with them is not simply dietary, it is physiological. Unlike kangaroos or wallabies, which graze grasses rich in water and energy, the koala survives on leaves that are tough, low in protein, and laced with chemical defenses toxic to most mammals. To handle this, its digestive system stretches the length of its body, with an expanded cecum housing microbes capable of breaking down fibrous cellulose. This is why the koala must move slowly, conserving energy at all costs, because the food it eats offers little margin for error. Yet inside the limitations of its diet lies its hidden advantage. Eucalyptus leaves contain water locked into their tissues, and the koala, through sheer persistence, extracts enough moisture from them to survive with almost no need to drink. In an environment where creeks vanish in drought and rainfall can be seasonal, this diet makes the animal resilient against thirst. But what it gains in water economy, it loses in metabolic energy, and so the koala sleeps, not out of laziness, but as a direct response to the leaves that fuel its life. Heat, however, remains the more dangerous adversary. Koalas are endotherms, generating their own body warmth, but in a climate where summer days can soar past 40 degrees Celsius, their main challenge is shedding excess heat. Unlike many mammals, they do not pant excessively, for water loss through respiration would be unsustainable on their already narrow budget. Instead, they turn to the very trees that feed them, exploiting another property invisible to casual observers: thermal inertia. During the hottest hours of the day, koalas can be seen clinging tightly to the trunks of certain eucalyptus species, pressing their bare bellies and inner limbs flat against the bark. Thermal imaging has revealed the secret. Tree trunks, especially those of river-red gums and certain coastal eucalypts, remain several degrees cooler than the surrounding air. They function as natural heat sinks, drawing warmth away from the animal's body through conduction. A koala hugging a trunk is not just resting, it is actively exchanging heat with the landscape, using the mass of the tree as a shield against lethal temperatures. This behavior highlights a critical truth about their survival. Distance is less important than detail. While kangaroos might travel kilometers to find cooler foraging grounds, koalas survive by navigating the subtleties of microclimates within a single patch of woodland. Choosing the right tree, one with thick bark, shaded positioning, or deep-rooted access to groundwater can mean the difference between life and death. The strategy is elegant in its efficiency. Conserve energy by remaining local and manipulate the tiny thermal variations offered by the environment rather than expending precious resources seeking relief elsewhere. In a continent where resources are scattered and unpredictable, this localized approach defines the koala's resilience. But tree choice serves more than just cooling. It shapes the entire architecture of a koala's movement. These marsupials are almost exclusively arboreal, avoiding the ground whenever possible. On the soil, they are vulnerable to predators such as dingoes or large pythons, and the exposed surface often radiates heat like a furnace. By staying in the canopy, they not only sidestep these dangers, but also maintain access to shaded corridors. The treetops function as highways, allowing them to move between feeding sites with minimal exposure. Yet, even these journeys are calibrated. Koalas are strategic, often traveling at dusk or night when the air is cooler and the risk of overheating diminishes. The rhythm of their lives is aligned not with the clock of the day, but with the fluctuating balance of temperature and safety. There is a subtle irony in the koala's famed stillness. What looks like lethargy is in fact an advanced thermoregulatory tactic. By entering states of torpor during the hottest daylight hours, the animal reduces metabolic heat production. Its heartbeat slows, its breathing deepens, and its energy demands fall to the bare minimum. When viewed from afar, this immobility appears passive, yet it is an active decision, one that allows the animal to bridge the daily crisis of Australian summers without tipping into thermal collapse. Unlike predators that must hunt regardless of conditions, or grazers that must keep moving to find food, the koala's strategy is one of selective withdrawal. It endures heat not by fighting it, but by waiting it out, banking on the consistency of shade and the resilience of its host trees. Predator-prey dynamics further emphasize the wisdom of this approach. Raptors such as wedge-tailed eagles occasionally scan the canopy for movement, and snakes patrol the branches in search of roosting animals. A koala that moved frequently would risk exposure, yet by remaining inert, blending its grey fur against pale bark, it becomes less conspicuous. In this sense, torpor doubles as camouflage. The same posture that regulates its metabolism also conceals it from eyes that hunt by motion. And when danger cannot be avoided, koalas are not defenseless. They can climb swiftly into the upper canopy, their sharp claws anchoring them into smooth bark trunks that would defeat many other climbers. But such exertions are rare, reserved for emergencies, for every sprint costs energy that cannot be easily replaced. The ecology of koalas extends beyond their own bodies, touching the health of the forests they inhabit. By feeding selectively on certain eucalyptus species, they shape leaf density, canopy structure, and even nutrient cycling on the forest floor. Their feces, though often overlooked, return partially digested matter to the soil, influencing microbial communities and supporting invertebrate life. In this way, their survival strategies ripple outward, linking physiology with ecosystem processes. Yet their specialization is also their greatest vulnerability. Bound so tightly to eucalyptus, they are at the mercy of climate shifts, deforestation, and disease outbreaks in these trees. The very adaptation that has allowed them to thrive for millions of years now constrains them in a rapidly changing world. Perhaps the most revealing dimension of the koala's biology is how finely it demonstrates the principle of survival through detail. Unlike migratory species that traverse vast distances in search of resources, koalas are territorial minimalists. They invest in knowledge of local landscapes, remembering which trees offer the most reliable leaves, which trunks provide the greatest cooling relief, which canopy paths connect safely to the next refuge. This intimate map, encoded not in vast journeys, but in repeated micro-choices, exemplifies a different kind of ecological intelligence. Theirs is not a strategy of movement, but of mastery, of knowing their small range so thoroughly that they can survive crises by exploiting the smallest margins of advantage. As evening descends, the woodland shifts. The cicadas quiet, the air cools, and shadows stretch across the undergrowth. Koalas rouse themselves, stretching stiff limbs, climbing slowly but purposefully into branches heavy with fresh leaves. Their large noses, packed with olfactory receptors, test the air, helping them identify the chemical signatures of suitable foliage. What follows looks leisurely, plucking and chewing one leaf at a time, but in reality it is precision foraging, a process of avoiding toxic overexposure by mixing leaf age and species. This restraint reflects the same principle that defines their daylight survival: balance over excess, precision over distance, patience over haste. In the Australian imagination, the koala is often seen as an emblem of softness and vulnerability. Yet in the scientific lens, it emerges as something far more formidable, an animal perfectly honed to a harsh and unstable environment through strategies that appear simple but conceal profound sophistication. To cling to a tree trunk is not idleness, it is a calculated exchange of heat. To sleep through the day is not laziness, it is a metabolic shield against energy loss. To live within a few hectares of woodland is not limitation. It is mastery of microclimates so subtle they escape the human eye. And so, in the quiet of the forest, as a koala presses itself to the cool skin of a red gum, it is not merely resting. It is enacting a survival rule written across the landscape. In a land where heat and scarcity define existence, those who endure do so not by roaming farther, but by knowing exactly where to hold still. The Australian interior does not forgive movement made at the wrong time. Across arid plains and mallee scrublands, heat builds in waves that bend the horizon, turning soil and sky into mirrors of each other. To travel under such conditions requires a mastery of timing, and among the great walkers of the continent, none are as iconic or as finely tuned to this rhythm as the emu. Tall, alert, and built on long, spring-loaded legs, the emu is less a sprinter than an endurance traveler. Its presence across vast swathes of Australia is not an accident of range, but the product of physiology and behavior calibrated for one of Earth's most punishing climates. Seen at dawn, the emu begins its day before the sun has gathered its strength. Moving in deliberate lines, often in pairs or small groups, it covers ground with a pace that is at once relaxed and efficient. Each stride is deceptively long, powered by limbs that evolved from a running lineage shared with ostriches and extinct giant moa. Yet this stride is not simply about speed, it is about economy. For every kilometer walked, the emu burns less energy and generates less heat than smaller birds forced to flutter or hop across the same distance. Its long tendons act as springs, recycling energy from one step to the next, reducing the muscular cost of travel. In a land where the price of wasted energy is dehydration and death, this mechanical thrift is survival itself. What allows the emu to attempt these long journeys under open skies is its plumage, a subtle armor against radiation. From a distance, their feathers appear shaggy, untidy, almost hair-like, lacking the sleekness we associate with birds built for flight. Yet this disorder is an adaptation in itself. Each double-shafted feather traps layers of air, creating insulation that reduces direct heat transfer. Countershading enhances this effect. Darker feathers line the dorsal surface, absorbing heat in controlled doses during cool mornings, while lighter tones on the ventral side reflect radiation as the sun climbs. This duality allows the emu to both warm efficiently when needed and resist overheating when the land turns hostile. Thermal imaging has revealed that the surface of an emu can be several degrees cooler than the surrounding air, a living paradox that allows it to walk under conditions that send most animals into burrows or shade. Still, insulation has its limits. When the mercury rises too far, the emu turns to evaporative cooling, opening its beak in panting cycles that release heat from moist membranes deep in its throat. Unlike mammals, it lacks sweat glands, but its large respiratory system provides a different avenue for temperature control. Remarkably, emus can adjust the depth and frequency of these panting breaths to balance cooling with water conservation. In the driest regions, this fine control ensures that they shed heat without burning through their limited reserves of body fluid. Again, the principle is economy. Every adjustment a calculation of survival in arithmetic. The bird performs instinctively but precisely. The emu's daily rhythm follows a strict logic. Move at dawn and dusk when the air is gentle. Rest in midday when the heat bites hardest. This is not idleness, but choreography shaped by climate. During the cooler margins of the day, they travel between soaks, ephemeral pools left by rain, and patches of seed-rich scrub. Their omnivorous diet, seeds, grasses, insects, and even fruit when available, requires wide-ranging searches. Yet food and water are rarely found in the same place, forcing emus to map their landscape in circuits that can span dozens of kilometers. Timing is everything. A bird that sets out too late risks collapse before reaching its goal, while one that moves too soon squanders the advantage of cooler ground. In this dance with temperature, reproduction presents perhaps the greatest test of endurance. Unlike many bird species where females shoulder incubation, in emus it is the male who sits the nest. After the female lays a clutch of up to a dozen dark green eggs, she departs, leaving the male to brood through the season's heat spikes. For nearly 8 weeks, he rarely eats or drinks, relying on fat reserves to sustain him as he guards the eggs against both predators and the elements. His strategy against the sun is geometry itself, choosing nest sites shaded by mallee scrub or orienting his body to cast his own shadow across the vulnerable eggs during the fiercest hours of the day. Through stillness, careful positioning, and the insulating down of his plumage, he shields the next generation from thermal extremes. It is a feat of endurance few other large birds attempt, and it underscores the emu's role as more than a walker. It is also a sentinel of patience. Predators play a part in shaping these behaviors. Dingoes, wedge-tailed eagles, and even large reptiles will seize chicks when given the chance. This constant threat presses emus into vigilance, but also into reliance on speed when necessary. Despite their focus on stride economy, emus are capable of bursts reaching nearly 50 kilometers per hour. Such acceleration, combined with zigzagging flightless wings that act as stabilizers, allows them to outmaneuver pursuers across open terrain. Yet, like their heat management strategies, these sprints are used sparingly. The bird's strength is not in drama, but in persistence, the ability to outlast and outdistance in a land where even predators must weigh the cost of pursuit against the guarantee of reward. From an ecological perspective, Emus are more than survivors. They are movers of life itself. As they range widely, they consume fruits and spread seeds through their droppings, often depositing them far from the parent plant. In this way, emus engineer their landscapes, connecting patches of vegetation across vast, arid zones. Many native plants owe their dispersal success to these wanderers, whose digestive tract softens seed coats, improving germination rates. What might look like aimless wandering across the plains is, in fact, a quiet act of ecological architecture, stitching together fragmented ecosystems through the simple act of walking and eating. Seasonal pressures layer new challenges onto this life. In wet years, emus may gather in loose flocks, moving toward areas of abundance with almost migratory urgency. In drought years, they spread thin, their movements becoming more solitary and unpredictable, each bird eking out survival on sparse resources. Such fluctuations make the emu a barometer of environmental change. When food vanishes, they move closer to human agriculture, drawn by the same grains and water troughs meant for livestock, often sparking conflict, but also reminding us that their patterns are not random. They are desperate recalibrations to an increasingly fragmented environment. What emerges from all this is a portrait of an animal defined not by speed or aggression, but by endurance and restraint. The emu is not a sprinter like the kangaroo, nor a climber like the koala. Its survival strategy is timing, pure and simple. By knowing when to move, when to rest, when to eat, and when to simply stand still in the shade of a mallee thicket, the emu thrives in landscapes that seem almost designed to defeat it. Its physiology, behavior, and even its role as a parent converge on one truth. In the battle against heat, the best weapon is not resistance, but rhythm. To watch an emu striding across the horizon is to see an animal in dialogue with time itself. Every step, every pause, every decision to rise before dawn or shelter at midday is an answer to the questions the sun asks of the land. And in those answers lies a principle etched into the Australian interior. Survival here belongs not to those who challenge the heat head-on, but to those who move when the air allows and wait when it does not. The emu's lesson is written in its gait, its feathers, its very patience, the lesson that in a country ruled by extremes, timing beats temperature. The last light fades quickly in Tasmania's forests. Daytime birds retreat to their roosts, and the cooling gullies breathe out mist that collects in hollows and creeps along the undergrowth. With night comes a different order, one quieter, but no less vital. Beneath the towering eucalypts and coastal scrub, dark shapes stir, and an unmistakable sound breaks the silence. A guttural snarl followed by a high-pitched screech that seems too fierce for the size of its maker. This is the Tasmanian Devil, an animal that has long carried the reputation of menace, but whose role in the ecosystem is better described as janitor than villain. Where others stalk living prey, the devil thrives on the dead, performing a service both brutal and essential in landscapes where heat and humidity can turn carcass to contagion overnight. The devil's most striking feature is its head. Disproportionately large for its body, it houses a set of jaw muscles that rival those of any mammal its size. When clamped shut, these jaws exert one of the highest bite forces relative to body weight in the animal kingdom, capable of cracking femurs, shearing through hide, and pulverizing tendons. This ability allows the devil to process carcasses completely, reducing an animal's remains not just to scraps, but to bone shards and fur. What might linger and rot for days in other ecosystems is dispatched in hours here, leaving little to fester in the warm air. For an island prone to sudden heat spikes and periods of stagnant humidity, this cleaning is more than opportunism. It is disease prevention on a population scale. By consuming what others leave behind, devils limit the breeding grounds of flies, maggots, and microbes that thrive in decay. This ecological role is reinforced by their nocturnal rhythm. Unlike diurnal hunters that risk overheating in the pursuit of prey, devils emerge after dusk when air temperatures drop and moisture thickens along the forest floor. The night offers them more than comfort. It grants efficiency. Carcasses encountered during the cooler hours are easier to locate as scent trails sharpen in damp air and decomposition odors spread more widely in the stillness. Devils' sensitive olfactory systems detect carrion from kilometers away, and once found, they can travel at a loping trot until they reach it, conserving energy through endurance rather than speed. Here, metabolism and schedule align. The cooler air reduces heat stress, while the nighttime landscape amplifies the signals of their chosen food. Contrary to their solitary image, Tasmanian devils often gather communally around a carcass. What begins with a single individual quickly becomes a chorus of growls, screams, and lunges as others arrive, drawn by the same scent. To human ears, these feeding frenzies sound violent, even chaotic, but within the noise lies order. By feeding together, devils accelerate the breakdown of carrion, stripping a carcass to bone in a matter of hours. This group efficiency serves more than hunger. It suppresses the ecological time window in which pathogens might multiply. The communal act, noisy and brutal as it seems, is a form of cooperation masked by aggression. Each devil eats its fill, but together they neutralize a potential hazard for the entire ecosystem. The stakes of this cleaning role rise with climate. In Tasmania's summers, heat waves can turn shaded gullies into incubators of disease. Without scavengers, the body of a wallaby struck on a roadside or felled by natural causes could harbor bacteria within hours, drawing flies that spread pathogens to other wildlife and livestock. By consuming the remains swiftly, devils remove this risk. Their energy-efficient scavenging strategy, capitalizing on what has already fallen rather than expending precious calories in pursuit, places them in a niche few other predators occupy. In this way, the devil acts less as a terror and more as a buffer, stabilizing the line between life and decay in environments where heat amplifies danger. This efficiency is not limited to carcasses alone. Devils are opportunists, and their diet includes insects, reptiles, and small mammals when encountered. Yet even here, their strategy favors ambush and opportunism over chase. They are not sprinters of the open plain, nor patient stalkers of the canopy. They are edge dwellers, patrolling boundaries of forest and scrub, the margins of roads and riverbanks where accidents, both natural and human-made, provide meals. In these liminal zones, they exploit not only ecological opportunity but human presence, cleaning the unintended waste of roads and livestock paddocks. It is an uneasy partnership. Devils benefit from human-caused mortality, yet in doing so they prevent the accumulation of waste that would otherwise invite more pestilent scavengers. Despite their ecological importance, Tasmanian devils have become symbols of fragility. The spread of devil facial tumor disease, a transmissible cancer unique to the species, has devastated populations across the island. The disease exploits the very behaviors that make their feeding efficient: face-to-face clashes over carcasses, bites exchanged in the frenzy. What once served to strengthen their collective role as cleaners has, in the modern era, become the very mechanism of their decline. As numbers dwindle, the consequences ripple outward. Carcasses linger longer, scavenger guilds shift, and the balance of disease vectors tilts. In this sense, the devil's vulnerability is not only its own, it is the ecosystem's as well. Behaviorally, the devil's survival strategy rests on contrasts. By day, it retreats into dens dug into cool earth or nestled beneath root tangles, sleeping through the heat that would overwhelm its dense black fur. By night, it emerges into a world it can dominate, where cooler air and darkness mask its movements. The juxtaposition defines its niche, hidden when the heat and light would betray it, active when its physiology and behavior align most effectively with environmental conditions. This cycle repeats with remarkable precision, embedding the devil into the island's broader rhythm of waste removal and nutrient cycling. There is irony in the devil's fierce reputation. Its screams and lunges may seem feral, but they conceal a deeper order, a system of survival built not on domination of the living but stewardship of the dead. It thrives not by making kills, but by ensuring that what has already fallen is not wasted, that the heat of the land does not transform food into poison. In the Australian mainland's absence of devils, a lineage lost there thousands of years ago, other scavengers cannot fully replicate this role. Only in Tasmania does this ancient marsupial still perform its nightly patrols, ensuring that death does not tip into danger. To observe a devil feeding under the cover of scrub is to witness more than appetite. It is to see heat and rot held in check by jaws designed for demolition, by behaviors honed through millennia of harsh climates, by an evolutionary pact between predator and environment. Each carcass consumed is not only a meal, but a reset, a cleansing of the land. And in the soft light of dawn, as gullies quiet once again and the air cools with the first breath of morning, the forest edge is left clean, the cycle completed for another day. The Tasmanian devil is not a beast of chaos, but an agent of order in disguise. It embodies a simple rule of survival. In ecosystems where heat magnifies every weakness, the difference between waste and safety lies in those who remove decay before it festers. And in this role, no animal fulfills the task with more efficiency or more necessity than the so-called devil of the night. The coastlines of Western Australia appear at first glance unforgiving. Wind-scrubbed thickets give way to stretches of sun-bleached sand and limestone outcrops, their surfaces baked to radiance under a summer sun. On islands such as Rottnest, where fresh water is scarce and the soil shallow, the midday hours are a crucible that few mammals would dare to test. Yet here, amid the shadows of coastal scrub and the meandering paths between thickets, survives a creature that has learned to negotiate the landscape not with brute force or long-distance migrations, but with a subtle choreography of timing, micro-habitats, and water economy. The quokka, often celebrated for its disarmingly cheerful expression, is in fact an evolutionary strategist, a water miser whose survival depends not on charm, but on a refined capacity to live within the tight margins of heat and scarcity. The first rule of quokka survival is schedule. These small macropods, kin to wallabies and kangaroos, follow a crepuscular rhythm, emerging at dawn and dusk to forage when the air is cool and the light diffuse. Midday is given over to stillness in the densest shade available, under the tangled canopies of melaleucas, within the understory of coastal wattles, or beneath collapsed thickets that form natural refuges. These hideouts are not randomly chosen. Each functions as a thermal island, several degrees cooler than the surrounding open ground, where air movement is limited and radiant heat is buffered by vegetation. By chaining together these pockets of shade, quokkas create a network of safe resting stations across their range. The land, in this sense, is not a single environment, but a patchwork quilt of microclimates stitched together by memory and habit. The reliance on shade is not merely behavioral but physiological necessity. Unlike larger marsupials that can cover distance to find water, quokkas are restricted by their island habitats, where permanent fresh water is absent or unreliable. They must therefore draw most of their moisture from food itself, feeding on succulents, grasses, and leaves whose tissues retain water. Their digestive system is tuned for this purpose, extracting every possible drop of liquid, while their kidneys operate at high efficiency, producing concentrated urine to minimize loss. In a place where evaporation can empty a rock pool in a day, such thrift is essential. This water economy extends into their very cells. By lowering metabolic demands during the heat of the day, quokkas reduce the buildup of waste products that would otherwise demand excretion and water expenditure. Stillness in this case becomes physiology disguised as behavior. Movement, when it occurs, is carefully rationed. Quokkas are capable of quick hops and bounding escapes, yet these bursts are costly, raising body temperature and depleting precious moisture through respiration. To reduce the frequency of such expenditures, they rely heavily on social vigilance. Groups of quokkas often rest or forage within visual contact of one another, creating a network of alert eyes and ears. If danger approaches, a snake gliding silently through the undergrowth, or in historical times, an eagle scanning from above, one animal's reaction warns the others, allowing the group to retreat into cover with minimal panic. By relying on collective awareness, individuals conserve the energy and water that would otherwise be wasted in constant, unnecessary dashes for safety. Here, survival is not only a matter of physiology, but of social structure woven into the fabric of daily life. Predators on islands like Rottnest have long been reduced or absent, yet the quokka's behavioral toolkit reflects its evolutionary memory of the mainland. On the continent, quokkas once ranged more widely, inhabiting moist forests and coastal heaths, where dingoes, quolls, and raptors posed constant threats. The fragmentation of that range and the retreat of populations to predator-scarce islands did not erase the instincts honed over millennia. What remains is a paradoxical blend of tameness toward humans, who have replaced predators in these islands with food scraps and photographs, and wariness towards sudden movements, shadows, or scents that echo ancestral dangers. These instincts still serve them in subtler ways, by keeping the animals cautious in their movements across exposed ground, encouraging them to stick to shade corridors that double as both safety from predators and protection from sun. The ecological role of the quokka is modest in scale, but significant in detail. By browsing on vegetation and succulents, they influence the composition of plant communities in thickets and coastal scrub. Their feeding habits can suppress the growth of dominant species, allowing less competitive plants to persist. In turn, their droppings redistribute nutrients across the landscape, fertilizing soils otherwise depleted by exposure and leaching. In systems where fertility is thin, this nutrient cycling becomes a quiet but persistent force. Quokkas also act as seed dispersers, carrying viable seeds through their digestive tracts and depositing them in shaded sites favorable for germination. Thus, their micro-commuting between shade refuges becomes more than a survival tactic. It is an act of ecological engineering, stringing together not only thermal shelters but seed pathways across the island. Heat amplifies risk in ways not always visible. For small-bodied animals like quokkas, The danger of desiccation is compounded by pathogens that flourish in warm, decomposing vegetation. In thickets where moisture lingers, the buildup of microbial communities can make food sources hazardous. Quokkas counter this not through conscious choice, but through evolved selectivity, favoring plants with natural antimicrobial compounds or moisture-rich tissues less prone to contamination. Their diet, then, is a form of disease avoidance as much as hydration strategy, a filter shaped by generations of trial and error within unforgiving climates. Perhaps most striking is how the quokkas' entire existence embodies the principle that in extreme environments, survival favors precision over scale. They do not migrate long distances like emus, nor dig elaborate burrows like wombats. Instead, they operate within narrow ranges, mastering the fine detail of their territory. Knowing which thickets hold the deepest shade, which patches of succulents yield the most moisture, which roots allow safe passage between refuges, this knowledge is as vital as any anatomical adaptation. It is a survival strategy, written not across hundreds of kilometers but across meters, the difference between shade and sun, between stillness and collapse. The quokka's apparent cheer, immortalized in countless photographs, belies the razor-thin margins of its existence. Its smile is the artifact of facial anatomy, not expression, yet it has brought the animal global fame. That fame, however, risks obscuring the reality of its ecological genius. Far from being carefree creatures of sunny islands, quokkas are strategists, playing a constant game of balance against heat and scarcity. Their survival reveals a truth often overlooked in narratives of endurance. Sometimes the key is not to outpace the sun, but to stitch together a living map of shadows, creating a lattice of safety where none seems to exist. In the cool hush of dusk on Rottnest, as seabirds settle into cliffs and the air finally softens, quokkas begin to stir from their daytime retreats. They emerge cautiously, noses twitching, ears swiveling, and then move from shade to shade, linking together their network of thermal islands. Their movements are unhurried, their foraging deliberate, their social groups loose but attentive. What seems to the casual visitor as the gentle routine of a harmless island inhabitant is, in fact, a finely tuned strategy of thermoregulation, water conservation, and social efficiency. The lesson of the quokka is clear. In ecosystems where extremes punish excess, the winners are not the fastest or the fiercest, but those who waste the least. Shade strung into networks, water wrung from leaves, danger shared among many eyes. These are the threads of survival on islands where heat dictates life. And so the quokka, the so-called happiest animal, is more accurately one of the cleverest, a water miser whose smile conceals a lifetime of calculations against the unforgiving arithmetic of sun and scarcity. Along the southern rim of Australia, where temperate seas crash against limestone cliffs and kelp forests sway in the surge, dusk delivers a scene that repeats itself with clockwork precision. From the restless waters, small dark shapes surface, riding the swell toward rocky coves and sheltered beaches. These are little penguins, the smallest of all penguin species, known affectionately as fairy penguins. Barely more than a foot tall, they seem almost improbable in the scale of their environment, yet they embody one of nature's most precise balancing acts, the art of switching between worlds of heat and cold, land and sea, day and night. Their lives are ruled not by brute strength or vast migrations, but by the careful governance of temperature, a two-ocean thermostat that allows them to survive in environments that swing between extremes. The sea is the penguin's primary element, but even there, heat and cold dictate every choice. Unlike fish or seals, These birds carry the burden of air-breathing metabolism wrapped in a body designed to insulate. Their plumage is a marvel of natural engineering, thousands of overlapping feathers that lock together into a dense waterproof layer, beneath which lies a downy undercoat trapping air. This insulation allows them to dive into waters chilled by Antarctic upwellings without freezing, yet it poses a different challenge when surface temperatures rise. On hot days, the very armor that protects them at depth risks overheating them at the surface. Their solution is behavioral and physiological. When waters grow too warm near the top, penguins dive deeper, seeking the cooler thermocline layers where prey congregates. It is an elegant form of thermal switching. Rather than fight the heat, they step out of it, using depth as a thermostat knob. Supporting this lifestyle is a vascular trick embedded in their flippers and legs, countercurrent heat exchange. Warm, arterial blood flowing outward runs alongside cooler venous blood returning from extremities, transferring heat between the two streams. The result is a system that conserves warmth in cold water, yet can also be adjusted to dump heat when necessary. It is the same principle that engineers use in industrial heat exchangers, but here it is written into living tissue, allowing the penguin to fine-tune its thermal budget with every beat of its wings underwater. This precision is not luxury, it is survival. Every calorie saved on heat maintenance is a calorie available for swimming, diving, or raising chicks. The timing of their landfalls reflects another side of their thermostat strategy. Little penguins come ashore not in broad daylight but under the cover of night. By day, the sand and rocks of southern rookeries radiate heat absorbed from the sun, and predators, raptors, gulls, and even foxes on some coasts scan the shorelines. By waiting for nightfall, penguins dodge both dangers at once. They emerge in groups, sometimes hundreds at a time, crossing the sand in tight clusters toward burrows hidden in dunes or beneath coastal scrub. These nocturnal landings are more than predator evasion. They are also thermal safety nets. Darkness lowers the risk of heat stress during the arduous shuffle from surf to burrow, a journey that would otherwise force their heat-sealed bodies into dangerous territory. The burrow itself is another key adaptation. Dug into soil, tucked under vegetation, or appropriated from natural crevices, it provides a buffered microclimate, cooler by day and warmer by night. In managed colonies, wooden nest boxes mimic this effect, offering shade and airflow that reduce the chance of chicks overheating. Inside, pairs raise their young with remarkable devotion, alternating foraging trips and shifts of incubation. Here, temperature is once again the silent partner of survival. Chicks left too long in the open risk lethal heat spikes, while eggs exposed to fluctuating warmth may fail to hatch. The burrow is not merely a shelter, it is a carefully chosen thermal regulator, an extension of the penguin's two-ocean thermostat into the land itself. Foraging behavior is equally tied to thermal cues. Prey availability, small fish, anchovies, squid, often coincides with zones where cold upwelling currents enrich surface waters with nutrients. Penguins are sensitive to these changes, adjusting their foraging ranges and dive profiles according to sea surface temperatures. In years of strong upwelling, food is abundant and close to shore, allowing parents to return quickly to their chicks. In warmer years, when prey retreats to deeper or more distant waters, foraging trips lengthen and the cost of thermoregulation rises. Each dive becomes a gamble of energy against return, calibrated against the shifting patterns of temperature in the sea. Predation pressures reinforce these choices. In water, penguins must evade seals and sharks, On land, they must slip past gulls and terrestrial predators. Heat and danger overlap in their timing. Daylight hours are when predation risk and temperature stress are both highest. By clustering their activities into the twilight and night hours, little penguins reduce both threats simultaneously. Yet this strategy leaves them vulnerable to artificial intrusions, coastal lighting that disorients their landfalls, or human disturbance that forces them into exposed weights. Here, their thermal tightrope becomes entangled with ours, and the risks amplify when their precise rhythms are disrupted. At a broader ecological level, little penguins serve as indicators of ocean health. Their population success or decline mirrors the balance of cold and warm currents along Australia's southern edge. Because they feed low on the food chain, primarily on schooling fish that respond quickly to temperature shifts, their fortunes track the broader productivity of the marine system. When seas warm and prey disperse, penguin breeding suffers. When upwellings strengthen and prey pulses are close to shore, colonies thrive. The penguin's body then becomes a barometer for two oceans, the Southern Ocean's cold push and the Indian Ocean's warm drift, meeting and mixing along the continent's edge. There is a subtle irony in the image of the little penguin. To many, its small stature and endearing gait suggest fragility, a bird surviving in spite of its limitations. In reality, it is a finely tuned survivalist, navigating not only two realms, but two climate regimes with every decision. Its dense plumage, its vascular tricks, its nocturnal schedules, its choice of burrow, all are parts of a thermostat that constantly flicks between conserving and shedding heat, between cold dives and warm surfaces, between the danger of overheating on land and the chill of deep foraging. Far from fragile, the little penguin is resilient by design, though its resilience is tied intimately to the balance of seas and seasons. As night deepens, the rookery quiets. The shuffle of penguin feet gives way to the soft sounds of burrows settling, of parents brooding eggs or guarding chicks, of partners calling in low voices to recognize one another in the dark. Out at sea, others continue their work, streaking through the cold layers where prey hides, flippers beating like wings against a resistance that never grows easier. Above them, the surface still glows faintly with residual heat, a reminder of the day they must avoid until night comes again. The cycle repeats, endlessly measured by temperature. The story of the little penguin is, at its core, the story of switching, between oceans, between air and water, between day and night, between heat and cold. Its success lies not in conquering either extreme, but in mastering the transitions, turning survival into a game of timing and choice. And in those choices, it offers a lesson for the ecosystems it inhabits and the humans who share its coasts. When the environment turns volatile, resilience belongs to those who know when to dive deeper and when to wait for the cool of night.